Hello, welcome back. Episode 22. This is That's Runnable. I'm Tommy. Thank you for joining. Are you well? Are you looking after yourself? When was the last time you checked in with yourself? If it's been a while, take a moment. You're no good to anyone if you're not good to yourself. That was good. That should be on a t-shirt. You're no good to anyone if you're not good to yourself. If you're running, or if you're just leaving to head out, I feel privileged to be accompanying you, to be in your ears, chatting away. I have been a little bit under the weather, to understate it. I've got shingles, which, I don't know, if you Google it, it sucks. And I don't really know why I have shingles, what was the cause, but I went to see a doctor today and they said that there's not much we can do, just to wait. So I'm here with my hot water bottle and my green tea, which is going down a treat. Today, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about me, actually. I'm attempting to run my first 100-mile mountain ultra in July. So today is really just a chance for me to talk about it. To talk about what's on my mind this far out from the race. We're 20 weeks out, or 21 weeks out, I think. 21 weeks and some change, which is scary. I'm going to be honest, it's pretty scary. I only just calculated how many weeks I have to prepare for this race, and it's 21 weeks. So we're going to be talking a bit today about what I'm doing to prepare for the race. Why Devil's Gulch? Why this race in particular? Why 100 miles in general? What's so attractive about running 100 miles? And I guess just some of the details, but quite frankly, we won't talk too much about all the details because I don't really know how some of the details will look. Because I'm going to use the next 21 weeks or so to be testing, figuring out, dialing down my nutrition, my race strategy, my gear. All that good stuff will be learnt through the process, and I'll make decisions on that probably sort of 17, 18 weeks from now, maybe even later. So we're just going to be talking today about sort of some of the things that are top of mind, how I'm thinking about 100 miles. Ultimately, I'm just really excited to be running a 100-mile race, and I guess you'll find out why in a bit. If you go to innovate.com, INOV8.com, and you go to the shoes that they sell, you'll find a full range of shoes, from road shoes all the way to like the softest terrain trail shoes. So you've really got like a good range there. So you go road flies, then they've got the trail flies, which are nice sort of all-round trail shoes for hard rocky ground maybe. And then you've got the trail fly speeds, and then you've got the mud talons, which are just really grippy on soft terrain. You've got the mud talon speeds, then you have the trail talons and the trail talon speeds. There's a full range, basically, is what I'm saying. So you really get exactly what you need from Innovate. They made their name from the fells of the Lake District. They know what they're doing when it comes to really grippy, comfortable trail shoes that are nimble and great for technical terrain. So if you are looking for trail shoes that actually have good lugs, good grip on soft terrain, look no further than Innovate. You can use the code RUNNABLE at checkout for 15% off. That's runnable at checkout for 15% off at INOV8.com. Innovate. Give them a go. This episode is also sponsored by Tenzing Natural Energy. I've spoken about Tenzing before. I've spoken about their energy drinks and how they're all natural ingredients, no artificial flavors, all that good stuff. But I wanted to just actually take a moment to talk about their sustainability pledge. If you go on their website, you can read more about it, but because each and every ingredient you'll find in Tenzing comes from nature, they believe it's their duty to give back more than they take. So they're the world's first energy drink to actually climate label. So they label their drinks with their climate footprint. They're Climate Pledge friendly, which is the world's first Climate Pledge friendly soft drink. They're B Corp certified. If you know what that is, it takes a lot to become B Corp certified. The drinks come in cans and not plastic bottles, so those cans are obviously infinitely recyclable. You can find their impact report on their website, and they're just generally doing all sorts to give back. They care about nature. I've spoken to the founder, I've spoken to the team. They actually do care about this stuff. It's not just greenwashing. So I thought I'd mention that because I wanted to give a bit of background on the ethos of Tenzing, that it's really not just an energy drinks company. They're doing more outside of creating energy drinks that really we should all care about. So if you do want to support Tenzing, if you want to support this podcast, go to tenzingnaturalenergy.com, purchase a box of their energy drinks, use the code RUNNABLE for 30% off, and get some good energy in your life. So, of all the 100-mile races around the world, why am I doing this one? Why Devil's Gulch? This is a small event that no one's heard of. It's up in Washington State, in Wenatchee, Washington, up in the Eastern Cascades. Beautiful area, but no one's really heard of this particular 100-miler. Why would I do this one? There's so many other amazing races you could do, you could dream of. Why would this one be the first? You know, I live in London. Feels a bit random, doesn't it? Well, let's dive into some of the details of the race, and then I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, my romantic relationship with ultra marathon running and the 100-mile distance. So this is a 100-mile race, which is about 167 kilometers. And it's about 20,500 feet of elevation gain. So we're looking at north of 6,000 meters of climbing. The race is held at somewhere called Mission Ridge Ski Area, Wenatchee, Washington. And that means it's in the pine forests of the Eastern Cascades. So it's a beautiful place, and it starts at high altitude. So we're starting at 5,000 or 6,000 feet, or 1,500 to 1,800 meters above sea level. So it's fairly high. It does dip down beneath that and then goes back up again. But it's a challenging race. Everything I know about this race is that it's tough. And actually, I thought it would be a kind of nice little idea to sort of read a little bit about Devil's Gulch from their website. And yeah, here we go. So there is a 50-miler, there's a 100-miler, and there's also a half marathon. The 50-miler and the 100-miler are, I think, the same course. There's a new 50-miler, 100-mile course for this year, which means that previous years it was the 50-miler repeated, just done twice, which is brutal psychologically. But now they have a 100-mile course, which does come back on itself a few times, and it's sort of in a similar area, but it all accumulates 100 miles. And here's a little paragraph on the course itself. This course is different from most of our races. It's hot, located in the hot but beautiful Ponderosa pine forests of the Eastern Cascades. You'll get unending views, wicked gulches, and huge rock hoodoos. Plus, an actual restaurant to serve you some post-race food and beverages, which is nice. The 100-miler is a tough one, with lots and lots of vert and heat. Good. The 50-miler is also challenging, just a half portion of crazy. For those who have a more balanced relationship with running, we've also got a half marathon too. So from the get-go, they're telling you that it's a tough 100-miler. And there's all sorts of information on the website. This is evergreentrailsruns.com. Evergreen Trails is the company organising the race. They are masters in putting on a good race. This is a fairly new race for them, this Devil's Gulch 100, and they're looking to try and make it a success. And so, I mean, there's not a huge amount of information other than this is not a course to underestimate. While the views are spectacular and the geology fascinating, be prepared for long, steep climbs and descents on technical and rocky terrain. Okay. So, what are we getting ourselves into, eh? This is a tough course, but that wasn't the only reason I chose it. I chose this course because I was connected to the race organisers through a friend, Josh from Borderlands, and we just hit it off, basically. And I wasn't entirely intending to do the 100 miler until we had a conversation. And it just occurred to me that I really have this romantic view of the 100 miler. A couple of years ago, I actually got a place in UTMB, which was incredible, bit of a lucky strike. But I got my place in UTMB and then got injured and couldn't start UTMB. So my only attempt of the 100 miler ended 5 months before, 3 months before I actually went. So this is my second attempt at signing up to one. But I'm really glad that it's in North America, because about 5-6 years ago, I started watching, no, longer, about 7 or 8 years ago, I started watching documentaries on YouTube and I guess all over the place about these ultra marathons, about the 100-mile distance. And there were often documentaries from North America, often from the likes of Billy Yang, West Plate. I name those two because they're the two that come to mind. There were others making great content back then, and probably still now, that just captivated my attention. And it was these North American races, the Western States, the Leadvilles, the Hard Rocks, that were really of interest to me. And it wasn't necessarily just the distance itself. It was something I saw in the attitude from these ultra runners. And so I want to tell you about a certain dying breed, or I guess attitude, in ultra running. And I really find it quite sad that I don't feel this vibe in much of the ultra running space anymore. But it is something that brought me into the sport and piqued my interest as something that I identified with. And that's important. It was something that I felt communicated a part of me. And that's the same with anything. If you feel attached to a brand, you identify with it. If you feel attached to a sport, you identify with it. If you feel attached to a certain fringe section of a sport, or a certain more hipster style of fashion, that's important. It communicates something about you, and that's why you're drawn to it. And I found this in ultra running from a distance. I found this in an old school ethos in ultra running that feels almost more rebellious compared to today's data-driven, hyper-optimized endurance world. It's not about shaving seconds, perfect gear, or dialing in the most efficient fueling plan. It's about grit and suffering and a bit of madness, testing your limits in a way that can't really be measured by a watch. And don't get me wrong, I love the data. I love all the analysis and the improvement through a scientific approach. But at heart, I'm in it for the story, the experience, the reasons we run, the desire behind the performance. It's sort of a dirtbag ultra runner, and I say that with affection. And that dirtbag phrase really, I guess, was introduced to me by Josh from Borderlands, which I think he encapsulates and captures very well with everything he's doing with Borderlands. It's where finishing is often more important than the time. Suffering is part of the appeal, not something to be minimized. Training isn't about the data, it's about the stories of crazy training runs that went awry, or stories where you were required to put as many miles in as you could in a 24-hour period in your training block. And the races don't feel like big sponsors or flashy expos. It's just a brutal course, a few stubborn bastards, and an aid station stocked with flat coke and mashed potatoes. It's Lazarus Lake and the Barkley Marathons, or the Backyard Ultra. It's Goggins running 100 miles with very little training. It's Carl Meltzer drinking beer while he runs 100 miles. It's the kind of running where your mind breaks before your body does. And that's exactly the point. you're sort of seeing how far your body can take your mind in a way. And this attitude isn't just about a strange nostalgia of something I haven't really experienced and only watched from afar. It's more than that to me. It really feels like a philosophy. That might sound a bit douchey. It might sound like a lot to sort of put on that attitude, and it really, all it is just some dirtbag ultra runners trying to see what their limit is. But today, endurance sport really leans too heavily, in my opinion, or it leans predominantly into the science of everything, which is great. It's VO2 max, it's lactate thresholds, it's fueling strategies down to the gram, and that's all good. But this attitude, this running philosophy that I'm talking about, it doesn't hate all of that, but it certainly doesn't worship it. There's something pure about just showing up, towing the line, figuring it out as you go. I like to say that I like my methods to be artistic as much as they are scientific. And it's why, some runners, some ultra runners will still go out with worn out shoes, carry gels they forgot expired, and don't fuss about their splits, because they don't really care about all those things. Because at the end of the 100 miles, it's not about how efficiently you ran. Really, the stories you tell at the end of your 100-mile race, the tales you swap with friends, they're about whether you broke yourself and still found a way to move forward. I hope that explains or describes what I'm trying to get at with this attitude of ultra running that I first fell in love with, and this sort of attitude that I romanticize about. And I don't know if we'll ever return to that, where we'll ever see characters like Karl Meltzer or even Courtney Dauwalter when she talks about digging deeper into the pain cave. It's the suffering, that's the appeal. I don't think we'll see all that much of that in the future. I think as ultra running progresses and becomes more popular and more sophisticated, it's likely that we'll end up just seeing more and more of the science come out and more of a sort of Kilian Jornet approach. But what I really love is this old school North American approach to ultra running, this dirtbag approach of taking limited gear, going out, seeing what you're made of, and embracing it. And there's something about this really small race, something about Devil's Gulch that captures that. It's a small race, it's a humble race. It is quite purely some people who have created a brutal course, and maybe some crazy bastards will come and try and have a go at it. And it's in a beautiful area, it's hot, it's high altitude, it's high amounts of climbing, and that's attractive to me. That's something that I've always romanticized, and I've wanted to have a go at. So that's sort of some background, I guess, on the attitude I like and that appeals to me, and why Devil's Gulch is a race that I think encapsulates that quite well. So why 100 miles? Why does it have to be 100 miles? Why can't it be 100k? Well, 100 miles has just always been a distance that I've thought I can't do. Having done a good few 100k's now, I think I've done six races that were north of 100 kilometers. Having done those now, I feel like I'm very much ready. I feel like when I have a 100k race on the cards in the calendar, I don't feel all that intimidated by it. Whereas 100 miles, I don't think I'll ever not feel intimidated by it, because it's just a distance that feels just unfathomable, to be honest. Difficult to really explain the mindset shift from shorter ultras to 100 miles. This is something that will it's guaranteed it will take me longer than 24 hours, much longer. And so you're thinking about going into the night and then potentially into the night again. And so my experience so far has been with ultras that are, can go all the way through the night, but have been just touched on the night really. And I think the unique challenge of Devil's Gulch and of a 100 miler, but specifically of Devil's Gulch, is the terrain. It's very rocky. The elevation, there's lots of it. And they're very long climbs. I think the race itself only has sort of 3, maybe 4 major climbs. So long climbs, long descents. The weather, it's going to be very hot. I'm not very used to hot weather racing. I've experienced it once in Gran Canaria. It was extremely hot at one stage. Wasn't a great experience. So I need to make sure I manage that properly. And then altitude, relatively high for a lot of it, which will affect how I perform. So that's a bit about why Devil's Gulch, the sort of romance I have with this dirtbag approach to going out there and having a go, rather than the commonly seen scientific approach of VO2 maxes, lactate threshold, fueling strategies, or very particular strategies for executing the best race possible. It's an artistic approach, something that appeals to me. Why 100 miles as opposed to others? And then, a bit of a list of the sort of unique challenges I'll be facing on race day. Now I want to talk a little bit about training in London and making the most of the city. Training for ultras, mountain ultras, whilst you live in a very flat city like London, can, at face value, seem like a massive challenge. And it is. It's not optimal. It is suboptimal. So I want to say that from the start. I think it's suboptimal to be training for mountain ultras in a city. Yeah. But there's so much you can do to make the most of the city. And there's a lot in the city that you might not get in more remote parts of the world, in the mountains. But, I think it's important to mention that it is most optimal to train for the trails on trails. It is most optimal to train for the mountains in the mountains, much like it's most optimal to train for road on the road. But there's a lot you can do. And so I want to go over a couple of points. First is the elevation puzzle. Second is taking on long runs and back-to-backs, thinking a little bit about that. And then third is strength training and injury prevention. So the elevation puzzle. Training in London. So some of the things I'm thinking about when it comes to gaining elevation over the next 21 weeks is hill repeats. So I'm in London. I am quite close to Hampstead Heath, which is nice and hilly, a lot of undulation. There's not huge amounts of really long hills and extended uphills, but a lot of hill repeats are going to be helpful. So if you are London based and you're listening to this, Hampstead Heath, Greenwich Park, Box Hill even, which is a little bit out of London, but it's very popular, very hilly there. Making the most of the hills you can find wherever you are to get the elevation in and just smashing hill repeats is exceptionally smart. It's a good thing to be thinking about. So although most of the time you'll be running on flat land, there will be hills that you can go to intentionally and go up and down repeatedly. So I'll be doing a lot of that. I'll also be using stair climbs, the stair stepper in the gym, and a bit of maybe even weighted hiking on those stair steppers. Massively beneficial for me. It's always been something I've gone to get on the stair stepper and just churn away for half an hour, 45 minutes, even an hour. The other day I did 200 floors on the stair stepper. I was sweating buckets, but I knew it was just such good training for climbing the mountains. And then, as well as the stair stepper, the incline on a treadmill. I'm a big fan of going to a treadmill, whacking the incline up to max, and just steadily climbing for a long period of time. That's going to be really one of my sort of bread and butter pieces in the gym, doing the cardio in the gym, getting elevation in. My go-tos on a daily basis are the stair stepper, the incline treadmill, and then any weighted stuff I can do and variants I can do with those. As well as stuff I can do in the gym stuff I'm doing in the gym for elevation gain and finding hills and doing repeated hills. I will also be looking at long runs and back-to-backs. So long runs and back-to-backs. There is a balance to strike between volume and injury risk. You don't want to just be doing more volume to make up for the elevation gain that you're not necessarily getting in the mountains. But as someone who is running predominantly on flat ground for most of my training, to be honest, it will be important to prioritize longer runs and back-to-back long runs to really demand that extra bit from my body. If I was living in the mountains, those long runs may not be, all as much. They may not be as essential as if I were to be in the flat sort of city. But long runs are just such a fundamental part of the training, and doing back-to-back long runs as well and just demanding that extra bit from your body is going to be really helpful. So I'm going to do that a lot. I'm going to think about how I can maybe go on a long run on a Sunday and then get up and do it again on a Monday, and planning out my training around my races to make sure I can do that. And then strength training. So strength training and injury prevention. I mean, this is the cornerstone of my training. I would say that as an athlete, I probably don't put as much volume in as a lot of runners out there, but I do a lot of strength training. And that's firstly because I'm quite an injury prone runner. I don't know if many people know that about me, but I'm quite injury prone. And over the years, I've sort of recognized that actually volume, although exceptionally important, and you can go back to a previous episode, is it episode 8? Why volume matters? I can't remember. You can go back to a previous episode and let me actually get you the answer to that. It's episode 9, Why High Volume Matters, where I speak at length about the importance of high volume. But that being said, I am someone who I'm quite injury prone. And if I just suddenly increase volume, then I have a high risk of injury. So I want to make sure I'm keeping the body resilient with my gym work and mobility and durability training. So I'm not just thinking about increasing my volume. I'm thinking about how much I'm putting on my body, how much I'm demanding from my body in all of my training, including strength training, including the stair stepper and incline treadmill, and including all of my running that I'm doing. I'm thinking about all of my training and how it works together. But I absolutely will be prioritizing being strict with my strength training to prevent injury, to make sure I'm staying resilient. And maybe just a little plug in here as well. The first course that I'm putting together for my coaching hub will be about getting to know your body and how proprioception training, or training how to be more aware of your body, can play a massively crucial role in all of your training, basically, and your performance. And so this first course is going to be predominantly about just getting to know the body and laying the foundations for understanding how to put your strength training in with all of your running training. And so I'm excited to be releasing that. And then a couple of bonus points just on like how I'm training in London and making the most of the city. I'll actually be going to the altitude centre. There's an altitude centre here in Shoreditch, just down the road from me. So I'll be going there. I think I've still got some credits left. I bought like a bunch of credits for that a while ago, and then I didn't actually use all the sessions. But I'll be going to the altitude center. I'll be doing some altitude training. So I'll get on a bike and just go into this basically altitude chamber. It's a room where the altitude is like 2,000 meters above sea level. So I'll be doing that. And then finally, and this might become obvious when we, in the next point, start going through my races, but I really love the fact that living in London, I can fly to mountainous places very easily. So this is an advantage of living in London, and something I'm trying to make the most of whilst I'm still here. But I do have the privilege of being able to go away, and one of the reasons why, one of the real privileges I have as someone who's self-employed now is that I do have more freedom to do that. But it doesn't take much for me to get out to a mountainous area, even within the UK, get up to the Lake District, get up to the Highlands in Scotland, or even to Snowdonia, or to the Alps and the Dolomites and all those sorts of places. So there are places that I can go to get a training week in. So I'm going to be trying to do that. Not too long ago, I was in Egypt, where I was getting a bit of rocky technical terrain training in, and some elevation and that sort of stuff, getting a bit of taste of running on treacherous terrain. So those sorts of things are obviously going to be really helpful in the next 5 months. So that's how I'm thinking about training in London and trying to make the most of the city, dealing with the elevation puzzle, getting hill repeats in, stair stepper, weighted climbs, incline treadmill, the importance of the long run and back-to-back runs, strength training and prioritizing that, and maybe even replacing volume with strength training, and then going to the altitude center, flying to, mountainous areas if I can, or traveling up to higher regions, northern regions of the country to do that. So next I want to talk about racing my way to 100 miles. Racing my way to 100 miles. That's what I've called it anyway. So I have a fair few races booked in over the course of the next 21 weeks. And really these races are going to determine the structure of my next 20 weeks of training. Because these races will be B and C races that I want to make sure I execute properly, but will be very demanding for me. Maybe we should start by talking about the role of B and C races. So a lot of people talk about B races, which is one thing. This is basically where you have, 1 or 2 A races for the year, and then you have other races dotted throughout the year that you are considering your B races. And B races are races that you don't execute at full effort. You're not trying to go and get a PR. You're not trying to do your best effort at this race, but you're using it as a race simulation. You're using it for the obvious training benefits you're going to get from that longer distance. And you're using it to test things. So you can use it for testing fueling, testing gear, nutrition, whatever you're trying to test out for the A race that you're prepping for, you're training for. I like to also include C races. So these are races that you take even less seriously and that you're, I guess, just doing for the fun of it. You're still looking to simulate your race conditions. You're still looking to test certain things. But these C races really don't matter to you. They're something you signed up for the vibes, for the camaraderie, for the experience. And they're not something you're taking very seriously. I have, I would say, 2 C races and 2 B races, but it's hard to know which is which. But I have coming up Lone Wolf, which is a 24-hour race. So it's a 24-hour looped race. It's in March. And that one is really going to help me with a bit of mental toughness going through the night. Night running is obviously going to be a big part of Devil's Gulch. So practicing that, simulating that is going to be important. And I'll get that from Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf is a C race. It's a race that I'm not looking to take seriously at all. It's something that I would like to complete. So I will need to probably get serious at one point with myself. But it's not something I'm looking to necessarily, go all out on. I also don't think it's possible for me to go necessarily all out on Lone Wolf because it's a looped race with a capped 24-hour. The last lap is a race, so if I do want to race it, I can have a go for 6.5k and race that. But I don't believe this is going to completely ruin me. The next race after that is in April, and it's in Madeira. It's the MIUT 115. This is a B race. This race is steep, technical terrain, technical trails, and this is going to be a key test. This is really going to be difficult, and it's not to be underestimated. So MIUT 115 said to be about 118 kilometers, and what is the elevation gain? I want to say it's something around 5,000 meters. So it's, we're testing ourselves definitely on this race. This is a race where I'm going to be able to test. It's going to be my first chance to test nutrition, to test fueling, to test gear and my setup, and really be disciplined with my pacing as well. I really need to be disciplined with my pacing for MIUT. I think it's very tempting to go to these races, and if you get like ISTRA points or you get like UTMB points for some of these races, it's quite easy to get lost in that and think, oh, it's going to affect my points if I don't go hard at this and stuff. But really, what's so important to me is that I stay strict throughout all of these races and I go into them knowing what I'm trying to get out of them. The third race I'm doing is ENDURE24. This is a C race for sure, but it's one that I'm really trying to just have fun with. I'm doing it with a mate, so it's basically a 24-hour race where you're trying to accumulate as much distance as you possibly can in a 24-hour period. And you do that. I'm doing it in a pair, so my friend Ben will do his loop or do a few loops, and then I'll swap over and have my effort at it. So this is going to be getting time on feet. It's through the night. It's pacing strategy. I can prepare. I can sort of test fueling, take my time with that. So another great event where I can really test out a load of things. And then finally I have UltraX Slovenia, and this is a stage race. So this is like the ultimate back-to-back long run. It's 55k, 2 days, so 110 kilometers over the course of 2 days. And it will be tempting for me to run hard on one of the days or try and compete on this one in some capacity, but I don't think I'm there, and I think that I really just need to make sure I stay smart with that. That's a B race. And it's just really important on all these races, Lone Wolf, MIUT, ENDURE24, UltraX Slovenia, that I race smart. It's really important that I think about the race strategy, race B and race C, whatever I call it, that I'm avoiding burnout and injury when I'm racing in my training. These races are there for fun. I do this for fun, ultimately. And they are there to prepare for my main priority, and my main priority is Devil's Gulch. So that's racing my way to 100 miles. It's a bit of information on how I'm thinking about the races that I've got coming up, and what I'm sort of thinking about as I go into each one of those at this point. And so the rest of my preparation really will happen as I go. At the moment, I'm sitting here feeling pretty ill. I've got not shin splints. I've got shingles. And I'm making sure I recover from that. I haven't done any running this week. It's Wednesday. I haven't done any exercise this week. I've just been walking around, and yeah, I'm going insane. And I'm being strict. I really want to make sure I do a good job of like getting better and not overdoing it. Practice what I preach. So this week is a down week, but this really was a week where I was supposed to start ramping. I was supposed to start really getting up to consistently over 80, 100 kilometers a week, with a lot of strength training, and really prepare for these races that I have coming up. But in the course of the next 20 weeks, I'm going to be thinking about testing all of these different things. So I'll be testing nutrition and fueling. I'll be testing different powders. Liquid fuel is something that I really want to make sure I get a good form of. Currently, I'm using Tailwind. I use Tailwind quite a lot, but anything that comes my way that I can test out, I'll be testing. And the great thing is I have many months to try these things. I'll be trying them in my long runs, in my training, in the races I'm doing. Race day nutrition is going to be something that I'll be training for. That's going to differ quite a lot from my training nutrition. So race day nutrition does look different because at the end of the day, there's only so much you have access to at the aid stations and all this sort of stuff. So I want to make sure I find a good balance between, what I'm using for fuel in my training and what I'm using on the day, because my body needs to be quite adaptive, I think, to whatever I have available to me. I've learned quite a lot from previous ultras on the nutrition and fueling front. I've learned that I do well with a high carb intake, so making sure I just have a lot of carbs going in. I've learned that I need to fuel early and often. So now I have an alarm an hour in. Well, I have an alarm every hour of my trail running, but I have an alarm from my watch an hour in. It says nutrition. And ping ping, eat an hour in. And even if I don't feel like eating, I will eat, because one thing I've really learned is to think ahead. I always try now to think about what Tommy in 2 hours will need. So when you're thinking about your nutrition on an ultra, think about what you will need in an hour or 2 hours and give yourself that. Because what you need in 2 hours, you might not feel like at the time. And that brings me on to the next point. And that is trust your intuition. Trust your intuition. That is the next thing I've learned from all of my fueling mishaps in the past. Obviously, your body will need certain things and you can't always trust your intuition. But I really believe there's something to be said for if you're looking at a table of food, you don't really know what you need, but you're looking at a table of food exhausted in an ultra, go with what you feel like. I think it's a good bet, because your body will be telling you what it needs based on how you feel. If you look at something and you think in theory you need that, but you really don't feel like it, and you shove it in your gob, it is likely that it will come right back out the same way. So that's just been my experience. So make sure you sort of dial in, you think ahead, so you don't necessarily find yourself in a situation where you're desperate for food. You avoid ever getting hungry. Don't be hungry. Try and eat before and feed yourself before you get hungry. Eat early, eat often. Think of what you need in the future. Think of what you need in 2 hours' time. Trust your intuition. I've also learned to rely on liquids. Relying on liquid fuel has been a saving grace for me. I think like one thing that I always neglected before taking Tailwind was liquid fuel and how great it can be. Apart from anything else, it's just very easy to consume. So I always have Tailwind. I now always have Tailwind in my left soft flask and water in my right soft flask. And so I will always have some sort of liquid fuel in my left to sort of naturally keep me topped up. And then the last thing that I've learned is to take morale. What do you mean? Well, I call little sweets morale. So just little sweets, things that you just want. Sometimes you just need, in the moment, you'll be all down and out, sad, feeling sorry for yourself. Sometimes you just need a nice sweet treat. So making sure I've got that. I've got things that just taste good, taste amazing. I remember being probably 70 kilometers into Mozart 100, and it was absolutely soaking wet, disgusting race. All I needed was just a bit of morale, and I was marching up this hill, and I got out a sweet, and I put it in my mouth, and it was like heaven. I was in that moment. I didn't think about anything other than the taste and sensation it gave me. And that gave me a good boost. So I'll be dialing in my strategy when it comes to nutrition over the next 20 weeks. I'll also be gear testing and packing for what I need. So I'll be thinking about my shoe rotation strategy. I'll be thinking about what's going to go into my 100-mile drop bag. Spare shoes, spare socks, talcum powder, my own liquid fuel. So like spare, probably tailwind at this point. I want to leave the drop bag feeling like I'm starting the race. That's what I always think about. So if I have a drop bag in the middle of the race, I want to have spares of everything I really need to make me feel like I'm sort of starting fresh. So spare socks, potentially spare shoes, anti-chafe cream, all that stuff. Stuff that I might not carry with me in my bag, but will be something I would take pre-run and I would prepare myself. So I can kind of go out of the aid station feeling like I've sort of reset halfway through. And then finally, I will be thinking about mindset and the mental game. Is this not what we do it for, folks? Is this not what we do it for? The reason the 100 miler is so attractive to me is just because of how challenging it truly is going to be. I am not going through the next 20 weeks necessarily trying to make it easier for me, because I can't. I ultimately can't make it easier for me. I will be pushing myself, but there is no way to make 100 miles easy. There's no way of making 100 miles easy. And so although I'm going to be trying to train to prepare so that I can complete this 100 miler, there's no way to make it easy, and that is the appeal. I want to go out there. I want to suffer. I want to experience the inevitable highs and lows. I want to develop my ability to problem solve on the go. I want to struggle through these mental struggles and know that I can address them. I want to learn about myself. I want to learn how I deal with things when they don't go my way. I want to be in a place that I've never been before, that I can reflect on and say, I overcame. I did that. I completed that. The reason I'm talking like this is because too often we think that happiness is found in comfort. We think that we need to find ways to make ourselves more comfortable so that we can be happy. And I think the reality is, the more you challenge yourself and push yourself to your limits, the easier everything else seems. You have to challenge your mind. You have to go to these places that are not easy. They have to be hard. They have to be difficult. They have to be a struggle for you to learn from them. And so I want that. The whole reason I'm doing 100 miles is to discover what I'm made of, to learn about myself, to realize that I'm capable. And none of that is possible without it actually being incredibly hard. So I look forward to the suffering. I look forward to the struggle. I'm not afraid of it. I want it. Bring it to me. So I hope that was interesting in some ways. This was my second attempt to record this, because a couple of days ago I tried to record this episode and I just felt so horrendous. My mind wasn't working. I'm still probably only functioning at about 70%. I hope you didn't notice, and I hope you enjoyed it in some capacity. So that's my sort of rundown on Devil's Gulch. I am gonna do another episode closer to the race, because I think there'll be a lot of things that I have discovered in the next 20 weeks that I think would be helpful to share just before I do the race itself. But wish me luck. Should we do some listener questions? let's do some listener questions. Let's do it. Before we dive into listener questions, I just wanted to mention the sponsors for this episode, Innovate. If you haven't already checked out their website, do go and see what they have on offer. They have a full range of outdoor gear, basically. So whether you're looking for trail shoes or a jacket for the April showers, or you're looking for some new hiking boots for that through hike you're doing, whatever it is, Innovate can sort you out. Their gear is just so good. Like, all of the stuff that they have is top quality. They are considerate about the environment and sustainability. It's comfortable. It's just great stuff. And most of it's pretty affordable as well in comparison to a lot of some of the technical stuff that you can get for the outdoors. And I just love the brand. I love the people behind it. Everyone who's used Innovate raves about Innovate. It's a very popular brand amongst its customers for a very good reason. So if you're looking for a little bit of a 15% discount, you can get that with Runnable at checkout, the code Runnable at checkout. So INOV8.com, use the code Runnable at checkout and see for yourself. This is probably the third day in a row that I've been sat here looking out the window to grey skies. You know, when the sun starts rising and then it kind of just stops halfway as if it's given up, like it doesn't fully go up. Well, that's sort of what the winter feels like, and it makes me sad. It makes me not feel in the mood for things, and I think I just need a little boost of energy. So if you're looking at Tenzing's website, tenzingnaturalenergy.com, and you're looking at the different blends, you can get bundles of all the different blends they have, but I want to suggest to you Tenzing Fiery Mango. It's a new blend, and it's specifically designed for these winter months to get you out of your funk that you and I are in. It's got lion's mane in there for concentration. It's got vitamin D and magnesium. It's also got 160 milligrams of caffeine from green coffee for that sustained boost, and it tastes great. So there's also that. If you want a little bit of morale, something that tastes good as you get your work done working from home, check out tenzingnaturalenergy.com. Go for the Fiery Mango. It'll make you feel better in this winter. Use the code Runnable at checkout for 30% off. That's tenzingnaturalenergy.com and use the code Runnable. Okay, first up we have Jade.
Hi Tommy, this is Jade from Bristol. I'm half marathon training at the moment, and my training plan has got me doing cadence drills. And my understanding of this is that I'm trying to increase my cadence, so increase the number of times my foot hits the floor when I run. And I had thought before this that it was better for me to be doing longer, more powerful strides to get faster. And so now I'm confused. I'm wondering if you could tell me what cadence is and why it's important and how I can use it to improve my running. Thank you.
Such a good question. I'm so glad you've asked this question. This is something that is quite contentious amongst those who don't understand, because it seems at odds, doesn't it? It seems like two different things. So cadence is the frequency of your steps, your step rate, if you like, and then stride length is the length of each stride. So if you think about it, if you were to jog on the spot with a cadence of 170 steps per minute, you would be moving nowhere, right? But you'd have a high cadence. Then if you were to lean forward, you'd be moving, but your stride length would be very small, but your cadence would still be very high because you're keeping that 170 cadence. Now, in order to go faster, you would have to just increase the stride length, and that would require more power output with each stride. So every time you step, if you were to keep that high cadence, you'd have to just put more power output into each stride, more power into each stride so that you can lengthen that stride. So you can make each step longer. It's really important that you marry the two, basically. So what you're trying to achieve is really efficient movement. And the best way to achieve that efficient biomechanics is to focus on both. So you're focusing on your cadence, you're focusing on the position of your feet beneath the torso with each step, and then you work on power output, then you work on your stride length, and that's how you get faster. So things like strides, something called strides, which might be programmed into your plan, would be exactly this. You would be running very easy. You'd have like a maybe 100-meter stretch, and you'd start by running very easy at a certain cadence, and you would keep that cadence, but increase your stride length with each step, and that would mean you'd end up going faster because you're simply increasing the stride length, which requires more power output with each stride, and that will increase your speed. So what this is trying to get you to do is keep good high cadence. High cadence according to yourself. So everyone has a different sort of natural cadence. It's wrong to say that you should just aim for an extremely high cadence. Some people naturally will have a very low cadence. That might be, someone with really, really long legs is gonna just move slower and might, have they will actually just naturally have quite a long stride length, but a slow cadence, but they're going to be moving faster because they're quite big. Whereas someone like me, I have quite short legs. I've got quite a high cadence, and in order to go fast with that cadence, I'm just really going to have to get more power output with each stride. So my stride length is going to increase. I hope that makes sense. I hope that helps. I don't think I have anything more to add. I can't remember if you asked any additional questions, but thanks, Jade. I hope that does help. And it's basically, the last thing I will say is that basically you're avoiding a lot of the time when you're training with cadence and you're practicing having a frequent cadence. A lot of that is because people have a tendency to overstride. So if you're only focused on stride length without keeping good form, it might be that you're overstriding. Like if you think about it, you could be stood still and have a long stride length if you just reached out with your foot in front of you. But that's not going to be a good position for your foot to be in when you're running because it's right up in front of your torso, way up ahead. What you want is to be landing beneath the torso, but also getting a long stride length in. So you're sort of there's certain things in running called poses, and so if you're driving with the knee, your stretched knee forward, then you're like really getting a lot of power output and landing still beneath the torso. So your stride length is long, but your cadence is still high. That may have just added confusion, but I hope it helps. Thanks, Jade. Okay, next we have Daniela. Daniela, we've had a question from you before, actually, maybe 2 months ago.
Hey, Tommy. Daniela from Atlanta. I don't have a question this time around. I just wanted to give a shout out and thank you for the introduction to Innovate. I just got my first pair a little over a week ago and I've taken them out several times. It's a great shoe. I needed something that allows my lower leg to work a little extra, and this did the trick. So thanks again for that.
There we go. A nice little natural plug for Innovate there. They are great shoes. And I think you do find when you have shoes that are a little bit more minimal or just don't have so much cushioning, or they don't have so much of an offset, like a drop, because most of the Innovate shoes are sort of maybe 4mm drop or a 6mm drop. They're not huge drops, so they're demanding more of the lower leg. That's good. That's a good thing. So I'm glad, Daniela, that they're good shoes. I told you. All right, that we'll have a couple more questions because that wasn't really a question.
G'day, Tommy. Just wanted to say congrats on the podcast. It's a really epic resource for anyone in the running space, and I'm particularly liking your ultra-specific content with your wealth of knowledge in that space. And my question today, I'm doing a few ultras this year. My length distances are pushing out and added time on feet. My question is quite a specific one. I've got 2 races planned. One's a backyard ultra and the UTMB race here in Australia. My conundrum is they're only a month apart, with backyard ultra being first. Now, I was wondering how you would go about managing the time between the 2 events, as that obviously interrupts the regular taper periods you might usually go into a race with. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Keep up the good work and look forward to your response. Cheers.
Cool. Thanks, Sam. That's a great question. My answer is it depends. Okay, next question. No, I'm joking. uh, it always is the answer. It depends. Hey, okay. So it does depend, because it depends on a few things. It depends on how hard you're going to go at the backyard. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to do 24 hours, or I'm just going to do 20 hours and then call it quits, then that's different from I'm going to go for as long as I possibly can and end up doing 48 hours of a backyard ultra and then try and recover before UTMB. So it really does depend on how you're approaching things, basically. But I would say, like, with a backyard, because there's a lot of rest time, because it's the same loop over and over again, and there's a lot of rest time between, so you have 10 or 15 minutes to rest, it is actually easier than you think, or you might think. Like, it doesn't actually take as much toll on the body. So really, it's up to you what you want to prioritize. If you want to prioritize doing well in the UTMB race, then, and you have that as your A race in the two, and then your B race is the backyard, then I'd make sure to just call it at a smart spot with the backyard. If it's the other way around, then, you know, have a go at the backyard and then see how it goes in terms of recovery to prep for the UTMB. But generally, I would say I'm a big fan of tapering, so I'm a big fan of like at least a 3-week taper, so 2 or 3 week taper, at least. So this does sort of put a bit of a spanner in the works, but at the same time, I would say, let's say it's 4 weeks apart. You said a month, so it's like 4 or 5 weeks apart. I would say you do the backyard and then see how your body feels. Make sure you get some movement the week following, and then sort of maintain that same kind of discipline of turning up frequently in the second week after your sort of recovery week after the backyard, and then taper from there and do a nice 2-week taper. The reality is you're definitely not going to lose any fitness in the time between the races, but what you can do is overdo it or injure yourself. So your priority really between the two races will just be to just heal up and get to the start line feeling fresh. Like if the bulk of your training for both these races is going to have to finish at the backyard, then you just have a nice sort of 4 or 5 week period where you can maintain a bit and then taper out and then just do the race. So I don't think don't worry about it. It's not actually going to make a huge amount of difference, because you're doing because you're loading the body so much in one 24-hour period or more with the backyard. Then you're going to want to just make sure you recover, basically. And so it's going to be more around a lot of sleep, diet, making sure there's a high protein diet, a lot of food, and just looking after yourself in the period between the backyard and the UTMB race. And I think you'll be all right. Yeah, I wouldn't think too much basically about your training specifically. I think more about the recovery and rest and preparation for UTMB. But good luck, Sam, and thanks for the question.
Hi Tommy, I'm currently a first-time marathon runner who's 9 weeks into their 20-week training program, and I've just been delivered a setback in the form of a anterior tibial tendonitis in my right leg. I've been told I can't run for 4 to 6 weeks, which is quite disheartening. So my question to you really is a two-part one. The first part is, what sort of things can I be doing in the gym to help aid recovery and keep my cardio base strong, as well as keeping me motivated? And then the second part would be, when it gets back to me training and being able to run for the last 4 to 5 weeks before my marathon, what sort of things would really benefit me the most to help me reach my goal that I set originally or close to it? Really loving the podcasts. Don't have a lot of time at the minute because I'm a third year uni student, so when I do my long runs, love to listen to them, so keep them up. Look forward to hearing your response.
Thanks, Colby. I am so sorry to hear about your tendonitis. First-hand experience with tendonitis, and it ruined me for a very long period of time. If it's serious, like if it's bad tendonitis, then you just have to be really patient. You have to be patient with tendonitis. It's not something that heals quickly at all. And so I'm not here to tell you, I'm not here to lie to you. It's going to be, They say no running for 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, it could be longer. In terms of giving you exercises to do, I would actually rather say, if it's possible, I don't know if, through your uni you can get a physio appointment or anything like that, but definitely see a physio. 100% see a physio and get a bit of a protocol for getting back to baseline. That's going to be your priority. And then from there, really it depends on how quickly you heal. So 9 weeks into a 20 week. Yeah. So it's going to be a case of just seeing where you're at when you are healed, basically. And then, like, when you're asking for things that like have the most bang for buck, basically, aren't you? But the reality is accumulated volume is probably the best thing. And when you're limited in terms of how much you can accumulate, then, you're going to be quite limited. Your biggest risk is to go back to training and try and meet where you would have been if you hadn't had injury. Don't do that. Don't go back. Like, let's say everything goes really well. You're 9 weeks into your training, into a 20-week program. And so you get, 16, 15 weeks into the 20-week. You're just encroaching on your taper period. You're basically missing out on a real bulk of, like, a huge amount of volume training. So to be honest with you, I would advise that your attitude really needs to change from trying to hit what you were aiming for and getting the goal that you really wanted to actually just trying to have fun with the marathon. And you're a first-time marathon runner, bro. Like, just do the marathon, enjoy the marathon, focus on making sure that you can remain healthy. Don't overdo it. Tendinitis is not something that's fun to play with, so don't worry about your previous goals. I would say, given the injury, you should focus on them on your next attempt. But at this point, I would say focus on recovery, work with a physio if you can, and don't overdo it when you return to your training. Like, don't just go straight into like loads of long runs and think that that's going to do anything. It's not going to work for you. Your best bet will be to just make sure you're sort of in good nick. Yeah, I think that's good. Thanks for the questions, Jade, Daniela, Sam, and Colby. We'll do more next week or whenever the next episode comes out. Really appreciate you all listening. Thanks so much. And if you haven't already, do please go and check out the sponsors of this episode, Tenzing and Innovate. They are really great products that I support, and there's a reason they're on the pod. So go check out them in the links. If you haven't already and you've got this far, do please leave a review or a rating or whatever platform you're listening to this on. It does wonders for the podcast, and I really appreciate it every time a review or a comment or a rating comes through. So if you haven't left one, I'd really appreciate it if you did. You can get a 10% discount on any of Devil's Gulch's races, the half marathon, the 50 miler, or the 100 miler. So if you are sort of closer to that area, or if you're like, do you know what, I'm going to go out and have a go at this race, you can get a little discount. It's in the description below, and you can join me, and we're going to do a little meet up beforehand and clink a beer before we have a go at the Sufferfest. That's it for this episode. Again, really appreciate you listening. Run the runnable. Keep showing up for yourself. And I'll see you next time.